Welcome back. It is episode 137. I'm your host, Jacob Harris, and this podcast is brought to you by Achievement Apex and Power Pit Rockingham. Today, I'm at Total Physique Performance, and I am joined by Aaron. Is it Scafi or I'm pretty sure that's how you
Scafi.
pronounce it. It's Scafi,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is Scafi.
I
Yeah, I
should have.
mean, Italian, so there's no R in it, but it's pronounced as if there is an R.
I've been saying it that this whole time like that, so I feel good to know I've been
I
saying it
feel like you'd
correctly.
be one of only three. And most people say Scaffy, even like my podcast co-host and like friends, they still call me Scaff. So
Oh yeah, that kind of makes. I mean, the other thing is though, I always just think of you as elite strength coach too, because Instagram does that to us, right?
I hate, I hate, and like I know, I get it. Every time I go to a powerlifting comp, well, not every time now, but there was a patch of time there just pre-COVID where you go to a powerlifting comp as a coach, and obviously wearing my brand, right? And people will come up to me and they'd be like, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're elite strength coach," and I'm like, "I'm Aaron. Nice to meet you."
It's not a
Like when you
bad
just go,
thing, right?
no,
Like,
just that up and coming time. It's just kind of like people are like, "Oh, like you're in the know and blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, my name's Aaron." Oh, that's why it's literally in my Instagram profile, like directly under elite strength coach. It says Aaron.
yeah, it's funny because it's like a good marketing thing. Like the marketing's working. You're like, oh, cool,
Yeah,
my name. But then also
yeah,
it's just kind of weird. At least you get something that resembles a good thing. Like I literally get like, oh, you're the podcast guy. You're
yeah.
the potty, the porta potty
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah. That's also true. That's also true. It's like
Like,
it's good branding at the same time. Yeah, we fucked up somewhere.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just Caleb's the same, right? Like
Yeah,
Melbourne strength coach. It would
yeah,
always it's like and you just kind of like when you speak to people online that much, you really kind of get that understanding of who they are. And
yeah,
you're an interesting one because you like even when I came across you and we worked together, must have been like 2, 3 years ago almost
yeah,
now.
yeah. It's been a bit.
Been a bit, and it was sort of like very. Here's what I do. It's this simple.
Yeah,
And there was not really like some people fluff their social media up just crazily, and it's almost hard to work out what they do.
yeah,
You're a little bit like, fuck, wait. So he does a bit of this. Does it? You market yourself very strongly
yeah.
as like body composition coaching. You're very big on obviously nutrition and training. You do a lot of powerlifting. For people who don't know, like, would you say that those things pretty much summarize what you do, or would you say it's broader than that?
I mean, I feel like as time evolves, right, things tend to evolve. But yeah, I mean, I coach mostly body comp, and whether that be powerlifting, bodybuilding. And the way I class it is the above average gym goer. So those that actually go to the gym and genuinely want results, they're not going to the gym to sort of fluff about. And like they know that there's more to it than just going to the gym and training, that there has to be a specific method or something in place. But a lot of my focus at the moment is health first approach, which seems to be something that's I think lost on a lot of coaches that work in this space. Um, struggling with clients to get results in terms of a client wants to grow or get leaner and they're struggling to get them to that point. And it's because 9 times out of 10, they're not looking at the client's actual fundamental health and just going, oh, okay, like let's check your basics. Let's check your blood pressure. Let's check your blood glucose levels. Let's check your blood work. Let's check some of this stuff and see where we're at. Let's check your actual health. And then, most times those metrics are usually quite bad. And it's like, okay, well, let's get those into place first and get them at a good spot because when you're healthier, it's much easier to get a result.
Hmm. I would I would also add, would you say it's I hate to be that guy,
Mhm.
society, which we live in
Yeah.
one. Structurally there's a bit of an issue too. Because
Yeah.
I would, like I
Yeah. I mean,
remember
when you have
sorry.
easy access to fast food, like it's the easy way out, right? Most people will take the easiest route to get to a point, which is great. But a lot of the time it needs to be done the hard way to start with to make it easier later.
Yeah, I guess part of me was also referring to, I mean, we worked together and blood sugar was something that came up. And I remember the process of going to the chemist,
Mhm.
getting like the blood sugar monitor and things
Mhm.
like that. And it wouldn't have called it easy. I found it
Yeah.
easy enough,
Yeah.
but it was weird, right? They were like, "Are you diabetic?" And I was like, "No." They're like, "Why are you doing this?" And it's the
Mm.
first time I've ever like, I'm at a chemist, I'm buying something I don't need a prescription for. Why are you even asking me?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it is an interesting point that because it's so it's weird that it should almost be the normal and it's not. especially when you're doing something that's a bit more extreme, right? So if you're not your average person, where you might you may not even go to the gym. You may just eat reasonably well, and you may just walk, let's call it your 10,000 steps a day on average, and that's it. That's your health. For most people, that would be pretty decent. But at the same time, if you're wanting to obviously train for a specific goal or get to a specific body comp or a specific look, we'll call it, you're probably going to have to do some training, and then that in itself brings in a whole like myriad of things, right? And it's like, well, we need to then account for that, and I think a lot of people don't understand that with more you need to look after more.
That's a good way to put it, I think.
Mm.
And also, things can be oversimplified for a
Mhm.
lot of like, on one end, you've got people like yourself who are trying to focus on certain things. And then I don't know if I want to use James Smith as an example, but you do have a lot of people on the other end who are like, it's not that complicated, just train and eat. And
Yeah, I think that it's a bit of both, right? It's kind of really depending on the person that's in front of you, and obviously that's how a coach coaches, right? You coach the person in front of you. It's like, for example, if I'm coaching you and you respond better to, hey, just train and eat, cool. It's like a cue. I'll break down what that means, so that when I say train and eat, you know that it means these five, six things, right? But some people may not respond to that. Some people may need the five, six steps, we'll call them, and go through each step like vigorously, so that they understand. Everyone's different, and it's just really coaching the person in front of you. But like when powerlifting, for example, you're teaching someone to squat, you're not going to give someone 55 cues. You might explain that it's 55 steps, but you might sum it up in three cues. But those three cues mean this, and this.
a lot of the time, you're more so looking for the reaction, right? Like as coaches, I think most people will try to think that coaching starts before the client's done anything. Where
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I believe that a larger portion of it usually happens after the client shows you their capabilities. Then it's
Of
time to
course.
do the coaching, right?
Well, you got to get to know the person in front of you, right?
Mm, absolutely. I want to touch on the blood sugar because it was something that got brought up a lot with us. And then I've had other coaches, or I haven't really had many other coaches, but I've spoken to other coaches and no one's really brought it up. At the moment, there's a bit of a thing circulating, sorry, with blood glucose, eating, and then like going for a walk afterwards, right? It's been
Mm-hmm.
talked about for a while now, but
Yeah,
I
it's
saw
been
it
around
pop,
forever. Yeah.
yeah, I saw it pop up again the other day, and people were sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on it? Because one of the other things that were brought up was literally just someone in the comments was just like, yeah, okay, but then like you go for a walk and then sit back down and then your blood sugar can go back up again. So it's not necessarily like life changing. What do you think
Yeah.
about it?
So the funny thing is there's no general rule, right? So it's like it can, sure, but it may not. So then what? So um a big thing where we have blood glucose that actually gets stored in the liver, so hepatic glucose storage, really. So what happens is a lot of the time when we do eat, we do have a lot of glucose, or not a lot of glucose, but we do have an amount of glucose store in the liver. And that's where a lot of the people that say, don't eat carbs because it boosts your blood sugar and blah 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 occurs. And the thing that you can do is when you do eat, you do have this option to, as you do walk, you start to actually move the glucose that's stored in the liver straight off the bat, and it starts to move it away, because the liver doesn't necessarily need to store glucose that often, or for any really particular reason. It's kind of like a last ditch effort. Most glucose isn't actually stored in the liver. So um, from that aspect, it's kind of like, well, when we do glucose readings, it's kind of like when you take a fasted blood glucose in the morning, especially if you're doing it at home, a lot of the time people will take it and it's like, oh, it's super high. And it's like, okay, well, get up, go to the bathroom, have your shower, get changed, sit down, take it again. Guess what happens? It tends to drop. And it's because like overnight, that storage of glucose in the liver has now moved out, and it's like making way for more to actually come back in and then do its thing.
So would that mean that you could see that kind of reaction, especially if you were to have like a really large carbohydrate intake before bed?
Oh yeah, 100% it does. 100%. I don't think I've had a client who hasn't had carbs before bed and then not had a fairly high or higher than average glucose reading before the next morning. Again, why we when you go get blood work done like professionally, they tell you to say that, like they tell you, 10 to 12 hours fasting. And that's not just for blood glucose, it's also for like your cholesterol and stuff like that. There has to be a time for that to digest and move and pass through and be metabolized, basically.
So to an extent, if it's higher in the morning, as you said, right, and then moving around and helps it and things like that, how much of a focus should be placed on it in terms of just being general as opposed to like maybe monitoring it for a reason. Like if like you said, if someone wakes up and it's high and then they kind of test it again and it's lower, is it the sort of thing where you're like, well, that's just normal and maybe don't stress too much about monitoring it as much? Is it more so that you would monitor it if someone's on a really high carb intake or possibly have like a risk of diabetes? That's
Yeah.
when it's like, that's more important.
But that's when that's when there's a bigger importance placed on it. Yeah, if someone's in a growth phase and obviously you're escalating carbohydrates, well, yeah, we're going to have to keep an eye on blood glucose because it's a marker that will give us an idea as to if we're pushing, close to the sun type scenario. But for your normal sort of average gen pop who may be in a maintenance phase, you know, blood glucose levels can be indicative of quite a few things. It could be that you're fighting off infection, so your blood glucose may go a little bit higher. So it's like, okay, like, hey, you're sick, something else going on, things like that. Stress can elevate it. So whether it's important or not, I don't think is necessarily the case. It's more so it's just a marker in a stack of things that we can look at to encompass health, and it's quite non-invasive in a sense. It's literally just a prick of the finger. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, that was a fun experience when we
Yeah,
first
I
did
mean,
it, just because you're not used to it.
well, you got to also remember, I think a lot of the people that I do deal with also prick themselves in other spots. So I don't think a little prick of the finger and getting some blood work is going to be that hard. Well, pricking your finger and checking your blood glucose is going to be that hard.
Yeah, no, we're going to get into that for sure. I've got some stuff I want to ask there. But what about the response that some people have? I'm interested in. So, for instance, when we worked together, at one point I was an offsider, and I don't know if you remember that. I think we started cutting on about 4,500 calories, which seemed hilarious to me.
Hmm.
And we saw some response even initially on that, which I found just crazy.
Hmm.
But the carbohydrate intake was pretty high,
Hmm.
and the I was using orange juice and choc milk to help me get there.
Hmm.
And the guys at work couldn't believe it because they were like,
Yeah.
"How do you drink a liter of choc milk and then bend down for 3 hours?"
That's also very fair.
Yeah. Oh man, I struggled, but my body
Yeah.
adapted to it pretty well.
Yeah.
I will say that one time I decided because we got the monitor, I drunk about maybe half a liter of
Hmm.
choc milk, and then about 45 minutes later, it was like a fat-free one too, so it was even a
Yeah.
little bit more sugar in it.
Yeah.
And I checked my blood sugar, and it was around like 4.4 or something,
Yeah.
which I think on an average scale, it's like 4.5 to 7.
Yeah, I think that it depends on where you go. The markers I've always had in my head for years is between 4 and 6. So
Okay.
yeah, it could have changed. I don't know, but I've always worked between 4 and 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, I felt like that was kind of lower than it should have been, considering I'd consumed about 70, 80 grams of sugar. I thought maybe it could have been a bit higher.
Yep.
Uh, and so for me, I kind of wondered, I guess that's part of what it is, right? Because people essentially, when they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, that's because their body doesn't tolerate it too well, I imagine.
It doesn't metabolize it as well, usually. So
Hmm.
there's a few different things to look at when it comes to obviously individuality is a big thing, right? Everyone's different. So it's like it's the biggest thing when it comes to anything we do when it comes to health. Every person is different. So no one thing is going to be the same for any person. But when we look at your particular case, right? Using that for example, like look at the conditions you worked in, look at what you did in terms of work, and then look at the time between taking or ingesting and then taking blood glucose and how much energy would have been used in that space of time. I'm not surprised. Whereas if you had that, sat down in an air conditioned room, watched TV, probably a different story, right? Because a lot of that's now just sitting there, not being utilized for ATP.
To be fair, I did not actually specify that time that I did wait the 45 minutes. I was just at a mate's house and we did just do nothing.
Well,
So,
and then there you go. So it's like it's pure like metabolizing. Like your metabolism and your glucose metabolism is phenomenal. So it's good. Take it.
yeah, oh, I wasn't mad about it. I
Yeah.
mean, but to be fair, yeah, I think at the same time, I still was doing that for a job. So,
Yeah,
my,
and that's
yeah,
just it. Like your
yeah.
activity levels and like they say, your TDE is crazy. It's through the roof. Like, dude, you're walking 15, 20,000 steps in 35 to 40-degree heat. Like, and your body's going to adapt to that and get more efficient at it. Like, yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah, I don't miss the work, but I definitely miss the metabolic advantages.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and I imagine now, right, with yourself, like you've probably slowed down in terms of like the type of work that you're doing and from a physical aspect, and potentially probably not eating as much or as much as you could when you were then, right, or being able to do the same thing, depending on how long you've been doing what you've been doing for. So, that's
Mm,
the beauty of the body, right? It does adapt.
yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I went. eventually got to a point we went through a cutting phase, and I wasn't as much of a little bitch about it as it was.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from being with you, which helped me.
Yeah.
And I eventually did it, and recently just got out of it. But I mean, yeah, my calories got down to like 1,800, man, and it was like
Which
yeah, horrible.
which is funny for like when people probably hear that, they're probably like, oh yeah, that sounds a bit more right. Not I'm cutting on 4,000 calories.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
yeah, and I was like 100 kilos when we were doing it last time as well. But I also just think in general, like, I just don't think I don't think unless someone's done something like that, you understand how you just like how your body feels and like
Mm.
how like it was just so strange, man, to be doing such high levels of activity because
Yeah.
I felt fucked from it, but it was like it was a different thing. I think there's people out there that would have. I mean, there's obviously there's millions of people out there that would have jobs like that or even harder jobs, and they would sort of know that you just. I don't know. I guess I worked with people who would just eat whatever they wanted, but because I
Mm.
was so specifically focused on I had to have decent macros, right? Like, yeah, okay, we can sit here and go, yeah, you had 600 grams of carbs. It's like, yeah, but my fucking fat was like 65.
Yeah, exactly
Like,
right.
so I wasn't eating donuts and just getting the food in easy. Like, it was
Yeah.
still incredibly hard to get it in.
Yeah.
But I was also getting in something that, from a thermic standpoint, worked better for my body as well, right? Like, it's not, I was having a really decent amount of protein and a really decent amount of carbs. So my body was utilizing that good anyway. Like it
Mhm.
was already, so there was a lot of stuff going on at play there. I was still training 4 or 5 times a week. So I think that's a thing that I experienced where I was like, okay, so that's what happens when you're doing everything.
Yeah.
And then I've had times where, yeah, like I'm doing nothing and I sit down heaps for a living and I'm like, oh, this is the other end.
Exactly right. Welcome to the
Yeah.
real world.
This is what 95% of the population is
This is
dealing
what
with.
coaches really do.
Yeah, yeah. But personal training is a hard one, I think,
Yeah.
because uh, you can either spend a lot of time on your feet, or if
Mhm.
you're someone who just kind of organizes their life differently, you can find yourself in front of a computer, doing content stuff a lot. And you have a day where
Yeah.
yeah, it's 3 in the afternoon, you've done 2,000 steps, and you're like, fuck, like
Mhm.
I'm
That's
like,
it.
I'm like
Yeah.
one of my clients now.
Yeah.
I need to do something.
That's it. Exactly
Um,
right.
a question I have about blood sugar before we move on is simply
Mm.
just the rise of they're referred to as GP1s.
Yeah. So you're talking about agonists, GLP-1 agonists.
I might have it. I was referring to Ozempic.
Yeah, Ozempic. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's the same one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. What would you like to ask?
Oh, it's just, I mean, I think for me, like, there's another one at the moment that came up, and I hate to admit this, but I do have TikTok now, and oh my God, I try to stay away from it.
Yeah,
I,
I've never had TikTok, dude, so I can't help you on that one.
oh, dude, it's good though because I put up a clip and someone mentioned gear in it, and it got 30,000 views in 2 days, and I was like,
That's all
yeah,
I've heard about TikTok, that you can literally put a video up and you can go viral in like an hour. I'm like, Jesus, that's crazy.
it's kind of scary, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, so that someone came up with a different one, and then like since I watched one video, because obviously that's what your phone's like, all of a sudden all these like ones are coming up, and it's
yeah.
crazy actually the amount of people I'm seeing on it. I actually worked with someone who was on it, and she'd never been overweight.
Hmm.
She just literally wanted to regulate her weight, and then when she would eat,
Yeah,
she would still eat horrible food.
yeah,
So I was I was just interested because we were talking about blood sugar. I have a client who's diabetic, and she's actually type 1.5, which I did not know was a thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not called that, but that's what she calls it.
yeah.
And she takes like metformin or something, but we
Hmm.
were talking about Ozempic because at one point she was on it and she was saying she actually was struggling to get it.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms
Mm.
of demand or in terms of being prescribed?
Demand, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. So my dad uses it. Yeah, the demand at the moment is crazy. And initially, the demand was because I think, well, again, what I was told, I haven't looked into it because it's not my field in terms of understanding like supply and demand of medications, right?
Mm.
That a lot of bodybuilders and people will obviously being recommended it also for weight loss. So a lot of GPs and doctors, obviously, it's a diabetes based drug. It's for those that are type 2 diabetic from memory. Um, However, it's got this handy side effect of weight loss because it's an appetite suppressant. So what GPs were doing at one point, they probably still do it, I don't know, is hey, you walk in, you're overweight. The first thing that they're going to do, it used to be Duromine, used to be the thing to give everyone, right? Like, let's give you Duromine because that's going to, completely crush your appetite, elevate everything else, and be like, let's just send you on your way. And now they're like, well, this seems to be safer and a better option for people. So doctors were referring it, and then obviously supply dropped because so many doctors were referring it out,
Yeah.
and
So
not referring it out for diabetics, referring it out for weight loss.
well, this is where now, and I've seen some people that are quite high in the industry even kind of defend it and sort of say like, oh, I think if it's a tool that someone can use, and that's totally fair enough. It's a
Yeah.
personal opinion. I'm not sold on it. I'm kind of curious what you think. I mean, your body composition is your thing, right? And
Yep.
one of the things I find with it, because I've had a client or two on it, and I had one recently, and she'd lost about 22 kilos or something, and then she still wanted to be on it, and she was like, "I'm on 200 calories a day." To which I replied, "I doubt it."
Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Good luck.
I don't, you would
Yeah.
probably not be standing here if you were.
No, that's fair.
And she wanted to keep losing weight. She'd lost, it was like 20 kilos in like 3 weeks. And I was like,
Mhm.
Jesus. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, you know, are you having protein? Because she was, I want to build muscle. And I said, are you having protein? Oh, like, and then she said to me, and it was like 30 grams a day. And I was like, oh, well, that's not ideal. She's like, but I'm just not hungry. So there's 2 points of it. What do you think of it in terms of using it as like an appetite suppressant, and do you think that that's a good thing? And also, do you think that someone could even use it effectively if their goal actually is to build muscle and have good body composition goals? Because chances are, if you're not hungry, you're going to struggle to reach things like your protein goals.
Yeah. So obviously, like you said, there's the two or three different things that go on with these things. Any appetite suppressant, I guess, will sort of class it as its own thing, right? Even though sits outside of it a little bit, but you know, suppressing your appetite is going to be obviously one way to effectively achieve weight loss, because purely you're just not having a higher intake of energy, because that's what it's doing, right? Now, do I think that you need to use an actual drug for that? Any drug? No. I think I would, again, coming from the health side of things first, really actually start to look at like food makeup and like what's actually in your food and what you're eating and that sort of thing first and foremost, activity levels, and looking at the other side of the equation, to have that deficit in place. Because sometimes, and a lot of the people that you're probably potentially talking about, a lot of them come from a yo-yo dieting background. Like a lot of them have been dieting for years on end, and that in itself is a problem. Um, and as much as a lot of people don't like to hear it, especially like being the client, if you come to me, for example, with you've been yo-yo dieting for 2 years, and it's like, you've lost weight, gain weight, lost weight, gain weight, right? And you're coming to me like, I want to just lose some weight. It's like, cool, I'm probably going to put you on a 4 to 6 month of just maintenance calories, and just say, hey, we just need your body to settle down, and we need to create some routines here for you. Like, you need to get better with your eating habits and just your habits in general, right? Around training, around nutrition, just your health habits, we'll call them. That needs to be addressed first and foremost. After that, when you start to have your actual physiology settle down a little bit, we can start to see what needs to be done. A lot of the time, when personally, this is anecdote, a lot of the time when I do that, their weight or their body composition starts to actually change. It's kind of like, oh, okay, look, you look like you train and you eat for your training. Look at that. And now it's like, okay, I want to lose 4 kilos. Cool, we can do that, and we can do that pretty quick and effectively, because guess what? You're in a healthier spot now,
Mm.
right? So I don't look at drugs as an appetite suppressant unless it's prescribed from a doctor for a specific reason. We as coaches can't go against GPs. We can always ask the question, and that's definitely a good thing to do, to ask questions. Um, but I would be looking at lifestyle first and habits first, and trying to work on that, and whether the person maybe needs some sort of intervention from a psychologist. And it's, again, you're not a psychologist as a coach unless obviously you're qualified in that. Recommend, have a network, refer out and be like, hey, cool, I can work with the psychologist and help this person get into some better habits when it comes to food and nutrition and training and just lifestyle habits. Like, we have coaches for everything, but people are so adverse to coaching the brain, which I don't understand. It's like, why wouldn't you? And that in
Mm.
itself can have a big impact on someone's, appetite, and then understanding that you don't need to turn to drugs for a lot of the stuff that, you're wanting to turn to drugs for. And then in terms of its, again, its ability to be just that appetite suppression, if you have to go through a drug route, I probably wouldn't use that, because like you said, if you're wanting to like grow and gain muscle and having an appetite that's suppressed, like, you need to eat food to grow. So if that's the case and they're giving that to you, they're giving it to you because you're probably wanting to lose weight. If you're wanting to grow and you do have blood glucose levels, there's obviously better usages. There's better things to use, like you said, metformin to insulin and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what do you think about maybe just not being aware of the health issues? Yeah, I have heard them refer to things like osteoporosis and stuff long term so far with
Yeah.
Ozempic, like, but I don't know if any of that's proven.
I'd have to relook at some of the studies. I mean, I can see a case for it, but I think that's in conjunction with not doing other things. Osteoporosis is really big and comes from literally lack of training and resistance-based training. So it's like we know that we can offset a lot of osteoporosis with resistance-based training over a period of time. So I can't see how that would be much of an issue. It was kind of like the deal where metformin used to deplete vitamin B or something like that, and everyone's losing their shit. And it's kind of like, no, it was in 60-year-old men who had 2,000 milligrams of metformin and only had 60 grams of protein, and it killed one of their pathways. And it's kind of like, really, it's got to be relative to the population.
Mm, yeah, and so we mentioned drugs,
Mhm.
right? Let's talk about the better ones.
Yep, let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I think one of the things that would I remember that was good about working with you is that I've never really felt like you even brought them up,
Mhm.
which was good because I can't
I
believe how many coaches do.
I steer away from them. I'm the opposite. I turn people off them.
It's yeah, it's and that's a good thing, right? I mean, like for me, I've just been at a point, especially over the last couple of years, where I'm like, I honestly think if I was going to do them, it would have been by now,
Yep.
and I just can't find a reason to. I genuinely can't go like, yeah. So that's just a personal thing, but I'm interested now because there's a lot of it going on, and you kind of mentioned, obviously Ozempic's different, but it was like if we're going to have to use a drug to get there, then it's probably not worth it. The difference being with something like testosterone,
Mhm.
it's getting more normalized now. I've noticed that in America, especially some of the American podcasts or some of the things I see online, it's like really becoming normalized over there, like almost just like and not even for like people who are like 45 and like just don't sleep as well, like people who are like fucking 25, 30.
Yep.
Testosterone is a bit of a different thing than let's put it and compare it to something ridiculous like trenbolone.
Mhm.
We obviously already produce testosterone, and then this testosterone is synthetic. Where do you find the line between something where everyone's sort of like, oh, this is, I'm just on TRT,
Yeah.
right? Which is they're usually not.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just not many that claim TRT and are on actual TRT, but yeah, that's fair.
Not often, no.
Yeah.
And then you've got like everything else. Why do
Yeah.
you think, if you do think, there's such a big line between something as simple as just testosterone supplementation
Mhm.
and then like being on gear and having a stack?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, when we look at it, right, like you just said, it's testosterone replacement therapy, right? So the whole point is that it's for those that, have issues with testosterone production naturally. And the way I'd look at it is, especially as you get older as men. So we're just going to class this as men, not necessarily women, because women do have their own form of HRT, and testosterone can be a part of that sometimes. But we're looking at, males as they get older. We know that our testosterone production declines, right? And we know that with that comes potential problems. Okay, potential health problems, potential psychological issues as well. Like a lot of people probably don't understand and realize is that like when it comes to men that go through what midlife crisis, throwing up air quotes here, is actually correlated to testosterone declining, like and how low that testosterone is compared to where the mental health of that male is and at that age gap. So we've seen that as soon as you give that age gap some testosterone, again, to bring that up to still inside physiological ranges, just maybe mid to upper end, guess what happens? They move out from this funk, and this whole midlife crisis thing doesn't seem to be as much of a big deal. Again, feel good, look good, are good, you're happy, right? Now, when it comes to being inside the physiological range, that's where the whole TRT debate comes into play, right? How much do you need to take to stay inside the actual physiological ranges? Different for everyone. Depends also where you started from. Also depends on your health status. If you're fat, got high blood pressure, and your cholesterol's through the roof, and you have absolutely no cardiovascular health whatsoever, taking TRT is probably going to be a bad thing. There's probably some other lifestyle factors that you can really address that may even lift your TRT or lift, sorry, your testosterone levels up slightly. we've seen that. So we've seen that in low testosterone production in males, that changing some lifestyle habits, getting some better sleep, obviously stress less, all that sort of stuff, can increase it to a point where you're pretty comfortable and you feel a bit happier and you feel better, right? And that's also come from the psychological aspect, being you feel good, you look good, you are good type scenario. Then we have those that take TRT, but they sit well outside the physiological range, and they're like, oh, 200 milligrams a week is TRT. It's like, it's probably not. It's probably not. It's definitely probably not for you, considering your muscle mass and the amount of muscle that you do carry. Like, you don't carry much muscle, you're taking 250 milligrams a week, you're probably double, if not triple, where you should be in terms of being inside the physiological range.
Yeah, I think the lifestyle factors that you brought up as well being the most significant, because that's where this argument of like natural testosterones have obviously become really popular, right? And people were
Yeah,
like,
there's so many people now promoting icing your balls and shit. It's like, bro, like, shut up. Like, again, we know that being healthy, and that's what I'm about, being healthy is the underpinning to everything else,
"Mm,
right? Get healthy first and then make your decisions. If you're not in a healthy point or at a healthy stage, get there first. And that's usually the hardest work, like getting someone genuinely healthy. And a lot of the time they don't know what healthy is for them. They've never been there. They don't understand that. So you're still taking them to a new spot. And it's like, no, this should be the normal for you. This is like when shit hits the fan and everything's horrible, this is your normal.
mm."
Like that's where I work and how I work. And then it's like, okay. And people sometimes don't like to hear that, because it's like, oh, I want to compete in powerlifting in 12 weeks. Dude, you are so unhealthy right now that I am not prepping you for a comp in 12 weeks. Guess what? I'll prep you for a comp in 12 months, and I'm going to take the first 4 to 6 months to get you freaking healthy. If you don't like it, that's okay. I'm not mad. Go to another coach.
Mm.
Like that's fine. Like I will not be mad, because I won't compromise how I roll and how I coach.
Yeah, that's the struggle, especially with a lot more general population, which is
Mhm.
why when you specialize a little bit more like you do, it's probably a bit easier, right? Because you're not going to get like, well, you might, but your chances are you're not going to get too much of like the extremely unrealistic stuff
Yeah, it's
as
true.
common as you will if you work at like an
Yeah.
anytime fitness.
Yeah.
I think the lifestyle stuff is a big part of it.
Mhm.
It's crazy for me. Like I've got someone in my life, I won't specify him. He's like straight away, he's been overweight for like years. I'm going to start bench pressing out the back. Got like one of those, when someone gets like a bit of gym equipment from like
Yeah.
a Verge side pickup or something, and they're like, "This
Mhm.
is good, right?" And I'm like, I mean, it's from the fucking 1970s, but like who cares?
It'll
Just
do. Yeah,
it,
it'll do.
it'll do.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, yeah, cool, man. Like try that. And then it was like, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna jump on test, man. Like I know you're gonna say like, shouldn't. And I'm like, come on, man, really? He's straight away. He's like, yeah, and I'm just gonna, just as a booster. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, I know you're 40
Yeah.
and you're overweight. I'm like, but fuck, surely the initial working out and eating a little bit better is going to be way more efficient than,
Yeah.
I mean, testosterone's going to be efficient. It's fucking testosterone, but
Yeah.
you don't even know if it's low.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it's like you just said. Well, first of all, people don't even know if it's low, right?
Mm,
The other thing is, and what I've seen again anecdotally, is that some people, I think older, we'll call them, sort of 30 plus, we'll say, tend to want to jump on gear, like whether it be testosterone or more, but starting with testosterone, and they've actually, it's a funny one, it's rare, but it does happen that they actually turn a corner, and it's almost the motivation for them to also get healthier. So it's like they use it as a crux to be like, okay, well, I'm going to jump on this, so because I'm doing this, I need to do this and this, instead
mm.
of where I come across is like, hey, I need you to do this and this first, and then if you need that, consider it, go to the GP, get bloods, go from there, right? Type scenario. It's very rare that it happens, but I have seen that happen. So it's a funny one. It's not something I would be like really wanting to dabble in and try and experiment with or suggest and be like, hey, dude, maybe if you do this, then we'll go. Like, it's probably not going to happen. Let's be real. But you do have that 1 out of 10 scenario where that can happen.
Yeah, it's quite common as well. Like I got a few, and so I started doing jujitsu about a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
and I'm not crazy about it, but man, I do really like it. And good thing about it is, I don't know if you're aware of this, Aaron, but if you actually rub bodies together with men, your testosterone gets higher. So I know you're probably really straight, but sometimes you should
Dude,
consider.
I'm a purple belt.
Oh, there you go. Then I didn't even know that. Didn't even know that. So your testosterone's already through the roof then.
That's why.
Yeah. Oh man, now it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
that's why the facial hair, right? Because your
Yeah.
testosterone's getting so big, you're
Yeah.
just growing. Yeah, yeah,
That's exactly right. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That look. I've had so many debates with people when it comes to natural testosterone production and increasing natural testosterone and people using a whole stack of these things.
Mm.
They don't ever specify that everything when they refer to a study is on very extremely low testosterone levels. So going from 0 to 1 while being an increase, you're still low.
Hmm.
Like, don't get it twisted. Like going from, if our ranges are between 9 and 32, I think it is on blood, when you read blood work, sorry. I think it's 9 to 32 is the reference range, right? It's like, okay, cool. So if you're at 7 and you get to 12, huge boost, amazing. You're still freaking low. Like,
Mm.
keep that in mind. Like, yeah, you've done well to improve it with everything that you've done and you've gone healthier and blah, 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 blah. But, if you sit at 12 and you're the healthiest you've ever been, okay, well, maybe there is a warrant to go speak to your GP, go speak to an endocrinologist and be like, hey, I train weights, I lift weights and I'm not recovering and I'm not sleeping well and I'm having some, potential mental health issues. Is testosterone replacement therapy something worth looking at and viable? They will have that conversation with you. Like, you've
Yeah.
given them a reason to have a real conversation. Don't be walking in there fat as hell and being like, hey, I want to get on gear. Because they're probably not going to do it unless you have a dodgy doctor.
Yeah, I get what you mean there as well. You went from low to not as low, not low
Yeah.
to high.
You're not low to being healthy range. You're still low. You've gone from lowest to lower. Like, cool. That's still great. And you may see an effect and feel better for it, but you're still low. And then it's up
Yeah.
to you whether you choose, hey, if you feel great and you want to stay there, by all means, stay there. It's not going to be the end of the world. You won't die from it. But if you want to be better and get better in the gym and recovery, and you're still not recovering as well and not being able to lift as much, whatever, and everything else is accounted for, well, then it could be a conversation worth having. Especially if you're an older male, I would say probably 30 plus.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I brought up like the jujitsu thing, right? Because I like it's crazy the amount of people like to me, there's a bit of a demographic. Like I said, I'm not there. I definitely don't have a purple belt. But I also I'm one of the non-gi guys, so I'm like not even doing it technically. Doesn't even
Yeah,
count,
you,
right?
you don't count. Yeah.
I don't count, no. So yeah, like the thing for me is like when I do go, like it's always like there's a very strong kind of to me humorous demographic, right? It's like they're either younger and they're like super like curious about everything that's going on in terms of like recovery and nutrition, or they're older and they've already got it figured out. Usually they're bald
Yeah.
and they're fairly jacked and they're usually on testosterone.
Yeah.
And it's like that's like the two people I'm encountering when I go there. There's never one guy who's like, "Nah, man, yeah, like I have like a really high like carb intake. I do a bit of bodybuilding." Most of them are
Yeah.
like, "I don't really train weights. Uh, Andrew Huberman is amazing. I just did an ice bath and I had black coffee until 5 and then ate a steak and came here." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Cool, man. That sounds horrendous. I don't know how you feel good, but that if it's
Yeah,
working for you,
we'll just roll with it, right? It's like,
yeah,
wow.
it's
It's
just
like
funny." Yeah,
when you have guys like Mike Musmeshi, if you know who it is.
yeah,
Literally it's a pizza, like one pizza every day. And he's like lean as shit. And it's kind of like people are like, oh my God, this dude eats like pizza every day. It's like, yeah, because he has one meal a day.
yeah,
Like, he has one meal a day. He eats 3,000 calories, but he trains like an absolute demon all day, every day. That's all he does is jiu-jitsu, like 24/7. So it's
yeah.
a little
It's
bit of a different story.
it was like when people were like, surprised at Michael Phelps's diet. You're like, bro, he
Yeah.
swims for
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, it's same as like Rich Froning, like,
Yeah,
probably the greatest ever CrossFitter to like ever exist. The dude's calories are through the roof. Like, no shit. Look at how he trains and how often he trains.
yeah.
It's really, and that's where like your James Smith type scenario comes in. It's just eating and training because in a sense it kind of is, but breaking that down and helping people understand such a vague concept and putting some context on it for people to understand is where I think the coaching side of things comes in.
Which is why people like get attached to such simple concepts, right? If it's just like carnivore ice baths and jujitsu, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's so much easier to do three things, right? I
Yeah.
just eat meat and I just have an ice bath when I wake up in the morning and I just train, and it's like that's cool, but there could be so many things you're missing out on that you're just
Yeah.
pushing to the side because you're like, nah, but that's unhealthy, and it blows your mind because you're like, how do these people kind of operate off this? And this is where I think it would be cool to get your like opinion on it, right? Because I know you're very, I don't know, this would be simple to be like, Aaron's a high carb guy, but like I would see you as a high carb guy. You like carbs. and
I'm a wok
you
man. I love carbs.
yeah, right. But you would like with me, right? It was like to kind of touch on a blood sugar thing. I literally remember saying to you, I was like, "What about my blood sugar?" And you were like, "Is it normal?" And I was like, "Yeah." And you were like, "Don't worry about it then." Like if
Pretty much.
you're eating, 600 grams of carbs a day and everything's normal, then like I think it was because I brought up sugar. I was like, "What about sugar?" And you're like, "Yeah, your body's fine. It's not.
Yeah.
You've got no reason to be worried about it." But we know that people look at sugar as inherently bad.
Yes.
So one of the things I found really interesting, I'm a big fan of Andy Galpin, who I'm sure you know who that is, and
Yep.
one of the things he did like a really cool video. This was years ago. I watched this, and it was as simple as just him talking about the fact that carbohydrates aren't essential.
Hmm. Yeah.
And this is interesting, right? Because this
Mhm.
kind of gives people like even more of a thing to lean on. You don't need
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and it's like fair.
Yeah.
But I'd kind of maybe like to explore why you think, for the
Yeah.
most part,
Yeah. That's
people
an
need
easy.
them.
Yeah, it's an easy one. No stress. So pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward, right? If looking at the context of the people that I work with and the demographic I work with, right, and really like the people that most coaches probably work with, we work with people that want to perform. So, what's your easiest, fastest, most utilized energy source in the body? Glucose. It's as simple as that. So if you have the ability to provide your body with fast acting energy to achieve a task that's set in front of you that you're trying to do, guess what your body's going to do? Utilize that energy. And the point is, if it's not, we would try to put you in a position so that it does.
Mm.
Right. It's not to say that any other dieting strategy, whatever you want to call it, nutritional fucking strategy, doesn't work or isn't as good or anything like that. It's just, hey, I work with people that want to be optimal and perform as optimal as possible and what they deem as optimal as possible for them. I haven't come across one that can't do that can do that without the use of carbohydrates. So even though from a life and living perspective, carbs are effectively non-essential because you have this beautiful thing called gluconeogenesis where your body can break down protein, turn it into glucose, because again, it still needs glucose. That's not the thing. It still needs glucose to do what it does. It's just it's getting it from somewhere else. Well, why do that when you can just feed it glucose? I don't get it.
Yeah, I think because the interesting part, right, and a lot of their argument is generally that your body can use fat as fuel, which my understanding is that it can, but it does so sourcing it systemically and it's not very good at it.
Yeah, well, the fatter you are, the worse it is. That's kind of why you're fat in the first place. So,
Hmm.
like, or one of the reasons why you're potentially fat in the first place. So, like, yeah, sure, it can definitely use fat as an energy. Like, it's a process we call lipolysis, but then also it goes from once it's used fat as its energy source, it will go to protein, and it will go, hey, we don't need this much protein because the differences in when it comes to protein is like we have the recommend daily intakes, right? Which is whatever. I don't even know what it is anymore. I think it's like 80 grams a day or some stupid shit. That's not to die. Like there's differences in the amount of protein based on what the criteria is. You want to be a performance-based athlete and want to actually execute your task, you're probably going to need more than what the recommended daily intake is based on a population. You want to do it based on your population. Your population is probably anywhere between 1.6 to 2.2, maybe even 2.3 grams per kilo. That's the range we work in when it comes to athletes, right? So at that rate, you're getting, you're 100 kilos, you're doing 2 grams per kilo, it's 200 grams. Guess what happens if if you're having zero carbs and you're having 60, 70 fat, as soon as your body starts utilizing fat and it's like, cool, we don't need that anymore, straight to protein, right? The other thing with using carbohydrates is guess what it is? It's protein sparing. So the beauty of it is, hey, your body's not going to go break down protein for glucose because it's got fucking glucose coming in. So especially if you're in a strength-based sport, it's probably not ideal for your body to break down the thing that helps you repair, maintain, build, grow. We want you to utilize energy for energy. So in the background, the protein can do what it's meant to do.
Hmm.
I feel like that, and to me, that's just a logical thing. Like, I don't understand how that gets mixed up. You know what I mean?
Feelings.
Yeah, and I don't care for people's feelings, and I never have. Like, Your emotional attachment to a concept is emotional attachment. Like it's not logical. Look at the logic. And
I
again, that's not for that approach isn't for everyone. Like I've got diabetic clients, so I can't do that with them all the time. like
mm,
like I've got a diabetic client who's on 190, 200 grams of carbs. Like it's great. She came to me at 110, like only using 110 grams of carbs. It's like, okay, well, let's build this up and work it out and find a strategy that works best for you. And guess what? Now the person's 200 grams losing weight. Like it's great.
yeah, a big part of that for her as well would probably just be per
It,
meal as well, right? Because I have a
it,
diabetic client as well.
it's education. It's understanding what's happening, what's being done, why we're doing it, and how to do it. Simple.
Yeah,
Again, yeah,
but I just mean in terms of like overall like reality is as like for someone like because that was the biggest thing with one of our clients. It was just like he can have carbs. It's just that he like once again understanding all those things, but just as simple as literally just being like, hey man, like yeah, you probably shouldn't have like 120 grams in one sitting.
it's genuinely, yeah, it's
Yeah,
genuinely, and that's an educational standpoint, right? It's like, hey,
yeah,
this is what I'm gonna. You can eat 200 carbs for the day, but just maybe split it up a little bit. Do this, have this, done this,
mm.
done, no problems. And again,
Yeah,
it's the coach, it's the client that's in front of you.
yeah, because some people might tolerate it better than others, and
Exactly right.
yeah, it's yeah. So I guess that point for because when I said feelings as well, I also just mean physical. I think some
Yeah,
people run off a lot of like, oh, but I'm doing it and I feel fine,
yeah,
and that's when it's like you could feel better,
yeah. Well,
you know.
that's just it. Well, I don't know about yourself, right? But I've had vegetarian clients and I've had vegan clients before. I've had clients where they've been, well, I guess we'll call them omnivores, and then they've gone literally to like vegetarian because maybe they've met someone and like their new partner's like, oh, I'm a vegetarian, so they go vegetarian for 6 months and they're like, I feel like crap. So the first 2 months, like I feel great. My cognitive and my cognition is fantastic. I've never been so clear in my head. Or when they go to keto and the same thing happens, and you're like, yeah, cool, man, I'm wrapped. 6 months later, they're like, I feel like crap, and you do their blood work and their blood work's gone to shit, and it's like, yeah, well, you're trying to like burn two ends of a stick. Like there's certain dieting strategies work for certain lifestyles, I think, and can be applicable to certain lifestyles. But if your goal is, performance, good luck performing well or to the best of your ability on little to zero carbs. Good luck.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this brings up the same sort of thing as we talked about, like testosterone, right? It was
Yeah.
like it's another thing where you're maybe let's say someone was just like, oh, it doesn't like they tried to take the same stance as carbs or whatever. Because I like so it's weird. Some people do have had low test and they still perform well, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another thing with like the whole ice bath thing. And like I have a client who's like, I do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, cool, man, that's fine. I'm like, when do you do it? He's like, I do it when I first wake up, and then I
Yep.
train.
Yep.
And my immediate question was, what does it feel like to go from ice cold water? And then do you warm up for long before you start lifting? Because I feel like if I got out of an ice bath and started doing dumbbell presses, I would feel like my shoulders were glass.
And do they warm up?
He says that he does. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So
Yeah.
it's really funny. It's something like physiology. Like a lot of people probably don't know, understand, even realize. Uh, ATP function and actual genesis of ATP is much higher and better and more efficient as soon as that body part is actually warm.
Mm.
So people that do legs, for example, and it's like, they've walked to the gym or they've jumped on a stepper for like 10 minutes and they're like, I just feel better training and I get better performance. It's like, yeah, because you're actually cycling through ATP more efficiently. And that's just basic physiology.
Yeah. It's something I do now because I'm drinking a coffee now, but for about 2 years, I didn't drink a caffeine and I just stopped using pre workouts and I still don't use them now. And I don't use anything before I train. So warming up became something I had to do. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I
Yeah.
just felt horrible.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
specific to the muscle groups that are going to be obviously targeted for that day. Like, you know, doing legs, warm up legs, doing upper, warm up upper type scenario. Like
Yeah.
that's not just jumping on a treadmill and doing steps and getting like a sweat or a cardio burn. That's not what we're looking for. It's genuinely specifically warming up the muscle group that's actually going to be in use.
I do like the stepper because you're depending on
Yeah.
what your limb length and stuff like that. I mean, you're literally going into
Yeah.
hip flexion the entire time, and so that's kind of I find that to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, exactly. It's a good one there, and that's kind of where I wanted to relate some of what we were talking about with training because now I know you're a purple belt. Well, there we
Mhm.
go.
Mhm.
I find a lot of this area kind of funny because we've talked a lot about nutrition, but training something that you do a lot with people, and I took a lot from when we trained together, and I learned a lot from you as well. That's really helped me.
Mhm.
And one of the things I started realizing when I was going there was, especially because like I don't know what it's like at the jujitsu gyms you go to, but we have like a little area where it kind of looks like they sort of grab some stuff from marketplace and like all the shapes, all the weights, different sizes, and
Yeah, yeah,
there's like those old school Olympic plates where the holes this big,
yeah,
and it's fine, it's all equipment, but like I'm a snob, so I'm like, ugh, I don't
yeah.
want to use that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I'm an equipment snob, have been for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why it was good with you. I remember you saying to me like, "Oh, where do you train?" And I was like, "Golds," and you're like, "Okay, sweet. There's going to be
Yeah.
heaps of shit."
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So I like a lot of I sometimes see him training, but I don't see a lot. But training for jiu-jitsu, I'm
Mhm.
doing air quotes now.
Mhm.
I think there's two sides to it. I think there's like ignoring it completely and acting like there's no carryover or whatever, and then I feel like there's people who are just like too like this action will completely
Yeah,
carry
yeah,
over, and that's too much as well.
yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like sports specific training, we'll call it.
Yeah, dude, it's
Yeah,
it's the funniest stuff, right? They're like, oh, so you do this. Like for me, I remember literally having someone comparing a leg extension to kicking a ball once, and I was like,
yeah,
that
no,
is the
that,
most
no,
hilarious thing I've ever heard.
yeah,
Oh, but your
that's
your leg extends. I'm like,
yeah,
oh
that's
my God.
yeah,
Like,
it's someone's got no obviously idea of biomechanics, right? But
yeah.
that's yeah. Look, I've always been of the mindset that your sport takes care of the sport.
Mm,
The skill takes care of the skill, especially something like a jujitsu. It's heavily skill based. Like, sure, having physical attributes it like is going to help, especially no gi, for example. Like, obviously, the bigger you are, the tighter you can grip because obviously you don't have like gis to actually grip and stuff like that. So you don't have material to grab onto. You actually have to physically like clamp down on the person. Um, yeah, sure, being bigger and stronger is definitely going to help that. However, training that in a gym, it's kind of like the same way we always train. You train muscle groups to get bigger and stronger. It just means that the programming around that may be different. It really depends on the level of the athlete and how, I guess, uh, competitive they are, is the word I'm looking for. If they're looking to go to like, ADCC, like it's a very different conversation. Like I coach ADCC guys, like genuinely wanting to go to the trials and compete, like go to I think wherever the trials are next, I can't remember, and then going for the next ADCC. Like I've been part of their training camps, so it's kind of like there's a difference between that and what they do in the gym, which is 2 to 3 weight sessions a week. Outside of camp, it's kind of like it's like 3 sessions inside of camp. It's just maintaining 2 sessions because their skill is the more dominant thing for them. Because at the other side of that, they have to be able to recover, but they're not doing these crazy twisty fucking one arm in the air split squatty shit. No. In what world is that functional to any movement, especially in jiu-jitsu that you do, considering everything in jiu-jitsu is on the fucking floor? So really, unless you're off your back or like doing I don't know what movements that you're going to do off your back, like a floor press and maybe that crappy ugly looking vertical leg press, short of that, like really, what are you going to do? Like, there's not much.
I was just going to use that as an example. I love the idea that you're like, oh well, I need to be when I'm on my back, be able to defend myself. So I'm going to do
Yeah,
some vertical leg press, and
yeah,
then I
yeah,
also want to be able to keep my butterfly guard. So I'm going to
yeah.
do some reverse squats with a cable machine because that will
Like
carry over
it's
directly.
yeah, it's ridiculous. Like I've seen that there's a difference between like performance training, conditioning training, where you're adding some of these more plyometric style, exercises in from a conditioning standpoint
Hmm.
and to train that aspect, sure, but it's not specific to the sport. It's conditioning in itself. It's kind of like what's this whole new term that people have come up with doing the two types of training. Oh, the terms escaped me now. Everyone's been using it. It's really going to do my head in.
You don't
Um,
mean like anything to do with muscle fibers, do you?
no, no, no. The actual training style of doing both conditioning or like,
Oh,
running and
hybrid
no, not
training.
hybrid. No, there's
Uh,
another term people are using. Anyway, it's literally called strength and fucking conditioning. It's what it's been known for forever. And
mm.
now there's a new fucking term for it. Oh, it's really going to piss me off now that I can't think of it. But anyway, I'm sure whoever's listening is going to be like, fuck, it's this. And I'm going to be like, yeah, you're right. It's that. But yeah, like this whole idea that like, doing strength training and then doing like actual running and conditioning, like has this other term, yet we know that it's genuinely called strength and conditioning. Like that's what the term is. That's what it's always fucking been. That's what the coaches are, strength and conditioning coaches.
Hmm.
But anyway,
Yeah, it's. I know what you mean. It's so funny because I worked in a gym for a while. That was just like some of the people that were there were ex-fizzers, and then one of the guys, like being kind of one of the main dudes, he's just super old school. So like
yeah,
anytime anything would come up, it was just always funny watching his kind of like he wasn't even that old, but he had these always had these old man reactions. He was like, "Oh, just do the movement. Why is
mm,
they, And it was like as simple as even what you mentioned before, man. People just think of it, like we'll speak to dudes and they're like, "Oh, do you deadlift?" And I'm like, "I don't personally. I'll do like an RDL or something, but I don't conventional deadlift."
yeah,
And then they'll say like, "Oh, I'm doing deadlifts, but I'm having real trouble with them." And then I'm like, "Oh, like what are you doing them for?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just want to get stronger with jujitsu and stuff." And I was like, there's probably nothing wrong with doing a deadlift, but is there any reason you choose specifically to do like a conventional deadlift? And they're
yeah.
like, "Oh, I just thought it was like a good strength exercise." And it's like, it is a good strength exercise, but like if you're just having trouble with it and it's not real, like, you're saying that you've gone up in weight and you're not even really stronger now. You should be getting stronger already, but it sounds like you're just having issues with technique and you've mentioned your back and stuff. Like, what is it that you're really trying to do? Oh, well, I was thinking like it'd help me get better with takedowns or something. And I was like, I mean, if we were to really think about movements, or if I was to think about what you were going to do in terms of that regard, I would definitely be thinking down more of the realm of like a power clean or something where you're going to be like producing more force, at least if I was to like try to justify it in my head. A conventional deadlift, as heavy as you can, it's not going to not carry over at all. It's going to make you stronger. But if you're just kind of having issues with it, it seems to me like maybe you're just going to do lots of heavy shit deadlifts and then probably end up stop doing them anyway. Like, to me, I'm kind of like, what is there a reason that you picked it? And they can never answer it. They're always just like, oh, I just thought they were good. And it was like, they are good, but like, are they good for you?
Well,
Yeah,
I
that's,
mean, really, when you look at it too, right? Like the deadlift is a good all round exercise, right? It doesn't, I feel like, hit any specific um, style of training, any specific goal other than obviously powerlifting and being able to deadlift and powerlifting comp, right? Short of that. However, we do have variations, like a simple trap bar deadlift is going to have a better carry over to sport specific outcomes. So the fact of the matter is that you can load it, right? It's an exercise that we can actually load and then actually gain results on and really just follow it along and go through its process. And it's tangible. So that's what I like about a deadlift. Obviously, the way it's programmed and how it's programmed, it comes down to it. But again, if you do have a client that's it's not working for, it's just causing grief, which is going to impact recovery. Guess what impacting recovery does? It just leads to higher potentials of injury, which is not good for anyone. So it's really just, again, picking the right exercise at the right time for the client that's in front of you based on their goal.
yeah. And seeing how you respond to it as well. Because the reason I brought it up initially is just because I did a little bit with you, and then we did like an RTS course here a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good because there was lots of like just kind of
Mm-hmm.
biomechanic kind of movements, air quotes, set up something so complicated it pisses everyone off in the gym sort of stuff. And I love it, right? Like I got really into it and I was like doing fucking weird bicep curls from different angles and supporting my triceps from different things. And I was like, this is really cool. But one thing I did find is because I got really into it and did it for like a period of time, I just found personally that it actually carried over to like my elbows and my and everything feeling a little bit better when I was rolling because I don't roll as much as some of these other guys, so my tendons kind of sometimes if I have like a week off or like or 2 weeks, when I go back, it's like one of the first things I notice. Like 3 rounds in, I'm like, fuck, my elbows are hurting. Like I'm just when I'm trying to straight arm things, and so for me, it was that kind of thing where I was like, cool, like this makes a bit more sense than, for instance, like I could just do like 1,000 push-ups, which is nothing wrong with, but it wouldn't achieve the same thing for me. Putting myself where I was like really isolating triceps and putting myself in positions to kind of like push that to that limit, I felt like actually carried over for me. And I feel like that's a thing that people should look at. And I guess that's where I was kind of curious as to like, is there anything that you personally find that you do for yourself that you like to be like, yep, like I just love having this in my program because I definitely feel like it helps when I'm on the mat?
I don't have anything that's specific. I don't have anything in my program that specifically is for jujitsu, or like I play a lot of golf, or like for golf specifically. Um, I do have exercises that I'll have in a program and in most clients' programs from like a movement perspective that is bang for buck in a sense. Like there's so much good and like so little to no bad in terms of it. Like a single arm dumbbell row, for example, like that there's no reason why that shouldn't be in every program like ever. Like you just might mix the reps and set schemes or where it falls in the exercise order. I do like obviously like a hinge pattern, like an RDL. So whether it be the deadlift, trap bar deadlift, or an RDL, so you do have those variations, like very, very big on those. Um, you know, and I like an incline press, to be honest, um, versus a flat press. Just personally for me, I think it's just the way that the chest is sort of set up, and you're hitting, chest and anterior delt a little bit more versus just like, I guess, more pec and no anterior delt, and then you get this weird sort of look where it's like if you're wearing a t-shirt, like the lower chest sits out, and then it kind of like no upper chest, and you kind of look funny. Whereas I think you'd rather have like the upper chest developed and the lower chest where the t-shirt just flows off type scenario.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
I'm
sure
all
that.
upper chest, so
Yeah,
that's
you know what I mean. I just feel like it's a better look in general. But yeah, for me, there's a couple of exercises where I just have them in a program, purely from a function standpoint and the way it does function on the body. Like like a lunge or a variation of a lunge, whether that be, or like a single leg movement being like a split squat, could be a Bulgarian, whatever it is. Things like that. They do have tons of carryover to just think like to life in general, whether that be they're going to benefit your sport irrespective, I think, of that sport, in most cases anyway, jiu-jitsu being one of them.
yeah, I feel the same with like to be honest, like I don't, it's hard to say like I give it to everyone, but like I don't think that there's a program I've run or I've had a client run for a long time that hasn't involved like a 45-degree back extension. I just feel like,
Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, you're right. Like that's what I'm saying. That there are those, and that's one of just the hinge patterns I was sort of talking about. It's like there
mm,
are just certain patterns or exercises you have to have. Like there's so much good and just so little bad, provided they're executed properly, right? Like anything.
absolutely, yeah. Well, I want to kind of run a few things before we finish up, and I say this every single time where I'm
Mhm.
like I'm going to run this in the form of a speed round, and then we elaborate and it doesn't happen. But we're going to try.
Cool.
If you had like a carbohydrate source, like let's say like money's no issue, and you're in a situation where like let's say somewhat like a genie comes out of a bottle and he's like, "Hey, Aaron, you can have a carbohydrate source for the rest of your life. You never have to pay for it, and it can be available with a snap of your fingers. What's it going to be?"
Personal or in general for people?
Do both. Do both if they're
Okay,
different.
so personal for me, probably pasta. I'm Italian. For people, easy digestion, rice.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
easily digested. It's simple, bang for buck, volume, covers so much.
And you're referring to the microwavable sodium filled
Uh
Uncle Ben's, right?
I mean, sure, provided you're healthy. And if you're not healthy, maybe just go grab a rice cooker and grab a bag and chuck it in.
Everyone's going to be, all the PTs are going to be so pissed. They're going to be like, "What do you mean I have to cook my own? I just want to
Well,
microwave it."
yeah, I mean, microwave Uncle Ben's rice with 2 tins of sweet chili tuna from Coles. Mate, you're laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be crying. That sounds
Yeah,
miserable, but
38 grams of protein, and I can't remember the carb. It might be 80 grams of carbs.
I don't care how much protein it has. Jesus Christ, give me some flavor. I can't eat tuna like
Well,
that,
you're
Jesus.
getting tomato basil Uncle Ben's rice. You're not getting plain.
Okay, that
Yeah,
changes
we're
everything.
going bougie. Like we're going up in class right now. We're doing tomato basil Uncle Ben's rice, 2 tins sweet chili tuna from Coles. Done.
Yeah,
Lunch
okay. I
sorted.
might even really shit the bed and get some of the special fried rice Uncle Ben's where it has that mystery ham in it.
Yeah, no, see, I haven't had that. I've only ever had tomato basil. And when that's run out, it's Mexican or Mexicana or whatever it is. That's it.
Oh, dude, Mexican food's the way to go. I eat
Yeah,
tacos 3 times a week, I swear, every time.
yeah, that's fair.
If if you were given, like, say there was a client, and once again the genie comes out and it's like this person can only do 2 exercises for the rest of their life, and let's say the context is as simple as just like they're not a crazy athlete or anything, they're just a person, and you could only choose two, what would they be?
RDL and potentially RDL, maybe a chin up or a single arm row.
Yeah,
Yeah,
generally
yeah.
good answers. I've had some people try to fuck me over with it, and it's actually quite creative, and they're like, Well, I would. So someone said like a clean and jerk once, and I was
Yeah,
like,
I was thinking of complexes, like,
mm,
but nah.
yeah. Now, I mean, yeah, I feel like if I could only do those movements forever, I'd still be pretty happy. If I could only
Yeah,
do a clean and jerk forever, fuck, that would suck.
yeah. I feel like yeah, an RDL takes care of quite a bit, and then either between a one arm row and a pull up or like a chin up.
Mm. So let's say you have like a health marker that is something that most people aren't really focused on controlling. And let's say they're not open to controlling many of them, as most people aren't. Is there one thing that you just think,
Blood pressure.
Yeah, this is right? I pretty much thought about that. Why?
Blood pressure because it is the leading. So heart attacks and every basically ailment to do with the heart is like one of the leading killers in society. So it's like, and it's such an easy identifier. But you can buy a blood pressure monitor from fucking LD for like $35. Or maybe they're 40 now with inflation, who knows? But you can buy them from LD is where I'm getting at. So I think it's a pretty inexpensive thing to check a facet of your heart health.
Mm,
It's pretty straightforward.
I agree.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of like alcohol intake and the kind of, well, there's two different ways. Either people think it's fucking awesome, do it every day, and you're a dickhead if you don't do it because you're not enjoying your life, or I'm listening to Andrew Huberman and I'm going to have one glass of wine a fortnight because it's bad for you. Where do you stand on it?
It's person dependent, right? It's like, hey, you can be some people are all in, all out type people. So it's like, hey, if that's how their personality is, and they're like, they're doing a prep or they're going through an off season where they have a bit more flexibility, but they're like, nope, I'm all about this lifestyle, and they say no, well, so be it, don't do it. And if it makes you happy, makes you happy. Is having a glass of wine or a beer every now and then going to kill you? No, it's not going to kill you. Like anything, if you abuse it, that's where the problems start to come in. But again, it's like that whole argument of, again, air quotes, optimal and all that sort of shit. So it's really, like I said, person dependent, client that's in front of you. And if it's impeding things like recovery, right? So it's kind of like if you're drinking too much, even if you're having one a night, but your recovery is getting worse and worse, it's like, hey, man, we need to pull that beer out or that wine out because your recovery's going to shit. Your sleep's going to shit. Because like sleep impacts, alcohol impacts sleep and sleep cycle. So that in
Hmm.
turn impacts recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that answer. What about caffeine? How do you feel about caffeine as like a performance enhancing thing?
I mean, we've got a billion studies on it to show how good it is as a performance enhancer. So why wouldn't you leverage it and utilize it?
Just like anything, right? It can be detrimental depending on how you use it.
Yeah, it's what do they say? The devil's in the dose.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So caffeine you
that's
can dose pretty high. So
I try not to. I get the fucking shakes, hey.
yeah, well, yeah. So from look, don't quote me on this, but from memory, I think the studies were anywhere between like 6 and 8 milligram per kilo. From memory. So I remember looking at it being, holy crap, that's like a lot of caffeine. Like 800 milligrams for a 100 kilo person is a lot.
Oh,
Again, don't I'd have to check it. Don't quote me on it, but I'm fairly sure that's what it was around, and that was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
so double scooping Ronnie Coleman's pre-workout was fine when I was doing
Hmm.
that. That's no wonder I felt good.
Yeah, it's not usually the caffeine in those; it's the beta alanine that gets you.
Oh, fuck, I hate that shit.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. So marijuana use, what do you think about that in terms of it's become more of a talked about thing when it comes to resistance training now?
Hmm. Yeah. Again, something can impact recovery. Does have an effect on sleep cycle.
Negative.
Which yeah, negative.
Mm.
So has that approach. At the same time, it's kind of like, where do we find this balance between the chasing of optimal and then being human and understanding the psychological side of things, right? High stress environments, high stress, high anxiety, high whatever. Sure, like there is obviously a place for it. Again, based on usage and how much, devil in the dose. Um, Again, you abuse it, like anything you abuse it, you're probably going to have a negative effect.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm going to put a speed round within this speed round because we talked about testosterone, and I basically want you to, with no explanation, which will probably kill you, hit me with either some merit
Mhm.
or hilarious. I'm going to give you those two options.
Sure.
Semen retention for testosterone increase benefits.
Semen retention.
Yeah, so not,
That
how no nut
so
November was a big
yeah,
thing.
nah. Good luck.
Hilarious.
Hilarious.
Okay. I encourage you to listen to the episode I did with a man by the name of Will Blunderfeld, who's
Is that
a
the long haired dude? Oh,
no,
is he not?
he's bald. He's bald.
Okay, no,
He
maybe I
was
think I
just
saw this.
on Tom Segura's podcast, and he
Okay.
is like a sexual kung fu master who
I,
yeah,
I saw clips for that. Yeah.
yeah, interesting. He's getting around.
No.
Icing your balls. You
Yeah,
mentioned
no,
that before.
fuck,
Hilarious.
fuck right off.
I don't. My balls wouldn't like ice. I'd hate to do that.
No, I'm good.
Sauna and ice bath protocols for testosterone increase.
For test increases, I don't think so.
Don't think so. Yeah.
No, like I said, recovery, sure, which could lead downstream to potential testosterone increases, but direct, no,
No direct. Yeah.
no, not that I'm aware of. No.
Good. Good. Because yeah, I would have agreed with that as well.
Yeah.
I did have another one that I thought there was some hilarious ones. There was one going around for a little bit that was it was like a combination of things, but people were talking about things like ashwagandha and then like not having sex with your missus and like kind of in this area. Like, do you think? And then also the because of jujitsu, that's an interesting one actually as well. Like contact, like so things like wrestling. Let's use that one as the better one. Ashwagandha we know is dog shit anyway. And who wants to not have sex with their partner? That sounds shit.
Yeah, a lot of these things come with acute spikes in hormones, right?
Mm,
So it's not just testosterone. There's a spike in a whole stack of things. So
yeah.
sure, you get an acute spike. Does that spike stay up? No, it's a spike for a reason. It comes back down.
Mm,
So sure, like training, for example, does spike a whole stack of things, right? Like sauna and ice baths and like icing your balls, sure, spikes things or starts to, give you an increase, but it always comes back
yeah.
because everything goes back to baseline. Unless you're continually icing your balls or sitting in a sauna 24/7 for the rest of your life, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and even the post nut thing, right? Because people are like, "Oh, your testosterone gets lower after you ejaculate." It's just
Yeah,
like, okay,
and
but
then
unless you're ejaculating 15 times a day, you're probably going
yeah,
to be fine.
and even then you're still going to go back to
Yeah,
cycle.
just maybe don't ejaculate in the gym toilets and then go try to do the hardest set of your life. Probably.
Look, I wouldn't encourage it, but if anyone's doing it, tag me in
Oh,
the training video, not the jacking off video.
I love that you
Yeah.
clarified
I
that.
just said, well, you never know. There's always that one person. Yeah.
There's all that always that one person. So what about just the wrestling side of things? Like, do you think even maybe obviously like you said, it will still be a spike, but I've found there has been a difference. I personally have just found overall in a few different ways, not in terms of testosterone production, but maybe, but I just generally have felt a lot better from like an emotional and physical standpoint, just from like rolling with people.
Mhm.
Like and I think that's why a lot of dudes, like I mean, you would know it,
Dude,
right? Some people start when they're 40 and their whole life becomes jujitsu because they feel better.
yeah, I love jujitsu for the fact and the reason, and Joe Rogan puts it best when it comes to this. You're trusting someone not to kill you. So it is the only martial art on the planet that you train at 100% and spar at 100% as you do in competition or life if it was a life situation. No other martial art does that because you genuinely kill someone. So, or you pad it up. Like Taekwondo, you wear chest pads and head pads, for example, whereas Jiu-Jitsu, you don't, right? You're literally, when you tap in Jiu-Jitsu, it's genuinely, hey, I submit because you're either going to break me or kill me. So that in itself you genuinely creating a bond with someone. And it's like that's why like there's no room for ego in jiu-jitsu, and that's the beauty of it. And then you're going to have a room full of people that can appreciate and become like every jiu-jitsu person becomes more philosophical because you actually start to see things in a different light because you need to be able to solve problems on the go when you're doing jiu-jitsu, and then that just carries over to other things. So
Mm.
that actual mindset shift changes. And that's why I think jiu-jitsu can be so healthy and so good for people. Sure, it can be brutal on the body, especially if you're doing comp rounds with, the 21-year-old going for ADCC and you're my age, 34, 35, and you're like dying. But, there is something in that, hey, like the dude caught me, cool. As long as you're not egotistical about it and like trying to muscle and all that sort of stuff. Like the thing I find with jiu-jitsu and most people, like they don't understand that everyone gets got. Like you are going to fucking tap and you are going to tap more than you get. You're going to tap more to people than you will tap people. And it's funny, like speaking to my coach, he says, I get tapped more now as a coach and a black belt and a third degree black belt under Pedro Sauer than um, like he did as a white, blue, purple, and brown. He's like, I get tapped more. He goes, because like he's coaching, he lets people tap him. Like he's teaching them positions. Like you have to reward the position sometimes and, help people do that. It's like just giving them that positive feedback.
Yeah, and sometimes it's yeah, and I noticed that when I started too. You fight for just so long when you first start. Like someone will just be trying to get my neck, and because I could, especially a lot with most people, like I could fight for ages if I wanted. But then it
Yeah,
was just like I didn't really learn anything. Like
no,
so I definitely learned a lot more when I kind of except I got put in a baseball bat choke and I didn't learn anything from that, and I still fucking hate that guy for doing that. That fucking
it's
sucked.
that's my favorite joke.
It would be because you're an asshole, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
would
my
love that, I imagine.
that's my favorite. But yes, yeah, and that's how I think the positive mindset sort of then kicks in with things like jujitsu, right? And then all the other things too. When the psychology of yourself is in a better spot, a more positive spot, you tend to feel pretty fucking good. And it's kind of like you're not getting testosterone spikes, probably. You're just getting like this positive wave of thought and emotion. And it's kind of like that's so much more powerful than a lot of the other shit. And that's coming from a strength coach. Like,
Mm.
don't worry about the little spike because it's like the glucose spike from eating. And we're like, oh my God, fucking you shouldn't because your insulin spikes. It's like, yeah, it does it when you eat protein too. So shut up. But it's kind of like you're having this positive effect from, interacting with people.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like a response, right? It's like funny that we're getting so freaked out by a response. Like our body's
Yeah.
literally just responding to something that's happening, and we're like, "Oh, is that good or is that
You
bad?" And it's
you
like,
change something, the body changes with it, and then it adapts. So it's either going to go back to where it was, or it's going to be elevated, or in this stage where it's out of whack. And then it's obviously the job of you and your coach to figure out why the fuck that's out of whack.
hmm,
Yeah, and bring it back to baseline. That's all I do as a coach. I bring people to baseline. If they're not at baseline and those are at baseline, I tend to manipulate so that they can grow, cut, whatever. And then guess what? After their event, after that time span, we're bringing them back to baseline. It could be that just their baseline's a bit more efficient, a bit better, a bit higher, a bit stronger, like whether their weight's gone up, whatever, but their baseline markers are still very, very similar.
yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said in that regard too. Some people are so out of whack that just getting them to a place of normality is actually sometimes harder for people than the actual
It's
process that follows.
genuinely hardest for most people because they don't understand one, what their true baseline is, and also understanding that that's the hardest work is going into the baseline. And once that's done, you're like, okay, well, we're good. Let's go do this.
Yeah. No, man, I really I appreciate your time, and I've always loved your mindset on training and nutrition. I genuinely learnt a lot from you working with you, and it was probably one of the most unique experiences that I've had, but also like a learning process as a whole to just help me understand and as a coach really kind of appreciate that working with someone isn't just about doing what someone tells you. You get to see how they work, their values, understanding their level of professionalism. And I think that you really brought that to the table. So anyone that is listening or considering going down that route, I definitely encourage them to consider you as a coach. Not that you sort of need that. I know you have lots of business, but I just mean that I know a lot of coaches. I have a lot of friends that are coaches. I see how a lot of other people go about business,
Mhm.
and I think that yours is still up there with some of the highest level that I've seen. So I just want to commend you on that, really.
Very, very much appreciate it.
Yeah. And, it's not something that we see a lot of the time in this industry. So it's in a world of cookie cutter programs and shit nutritional information, it's great to just see people provide decent information.
We try, mate. We try.
That's all you can do.
It's exactly it.
I will, before we go, give a shout out to Supplement Mart Rockingham, Durst Trap, Pet Test Australia, and Bulk Gym Chalk. And I will also like to say that if people want to listen to you talk even more, which I'm sure they do after this, they can find your podcast, Bro with Brains,
Yeah.
on Spotify.
Yeah. So I've got the two. I mean, my other one's pretty old now, but I've had some pretty big guests on it. But Bros with Brains on Spotify and literally just the Elite Strength podcast. So I've had some pretty big people on there, Dr. Scott Stevens, and I've had, Gabby Fundaro, I've had Joe Jeffrey, Austin Stout, Paul Standall, um, yeah, like Aaron Chacon from the States. Like I've had a lot of big guests on there. I've been pretty fortunate to be able to liaise with them.
Fantastic. Oh, there sounds like
Yeah.
a couple of I've missed then that I need to get onto.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a few in there. There's I think about 20, 22 episodes or so.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I might put some of those links in there for people anyway, so they can check them out. Because
Beautiful.
that's the other thing, right? This is the beauty of the world we live in. Let's all be thankful for that. We can connect
Yeah.
over social media and do this and make sure that we're in the same time zone, which apparently I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, we got there. We got there.
We got there in the end. So, man, look, thank you very much again for coming on. If you want to find Aaron on Instagram, it's under Elite Strength Coach, and then his name will be under that. It's Aaron Scafi.
It is.
Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, bud.